Hello and welcome back to the Late Night Cooldown. I'm your host Kyle Antoine, and I just want to quickly say thank you for everyone who has tuned in for Season 1. There's 3 episodes left to go. That's tomorrow's episode and the episode that comes April 12th, and then the Season 1 finale, which comes April 15th. Season 2 starts April 30th, and I am so excited for Season 2, but we gotta pay our respects to Season 1, and so let's get into it. So, is sobriety for me? In my experience, I didn't want to get sober. I wanted a better life. I kind of needed, almost, a better life. You know, if I didn't get sober and I didn't stay sober, for me, I knew I would probably end up killing myself, probably sometime in my mid to late 30s. And I say that because for some people, it is life or death, whether it's through alcohol-related diseases itself or through, mental health crises. For me, it would have, definitely caused, something so severe like, committing suicide in my 30s. And I say this because if you're wanting to get sober, then sobriety is for you. And if you can't stay sober and you're finding it very difficult to go even an hour or a minute or a day without a drink or a drug, then I'm here to tell you that there is hope and you are not alone. And what you are dealing with is likely a disease called alcoholism or addiction. Now, some people out there in the world can drink, and they may heavily drink, and they are not, they're not alcoholic, or they're not, addicted. They're not an addict. But for the others who don't drink just to have a drink with their friends, they drink because it gives them life, it gives them fuel, it gives them something that they're not getting within themselves, then this episode really is for you. And if you're just a heavy drinker and you're sober curious, then you're also welcome to, hear what I have to say about it. So, how can you, define sobriety? What is sobriety? So, sobriety is, the complete and total abstinence of alcohol and or drugs. And abstinence, if you do not know, is abstaining, like you don't do it, right? So I am a recovered alcoholic. And what does recovered mean? Recovered means that my alcoholism has been what's kind of termed as arrested. It's a disease that has been arrested. I will never ever be cured. I will never be quote unquote normal. I have a disease that can only be, arrested. And what does arrested mean? It means, it's still there, but it's kind of like, tamed, right? Meaning, I'm not thinking of alcohol every waking moment of my life. I'm not out to go get alcohol. I'm not blacking out. I'm not, destroying relationships or property or making a fool of myself as a result of my alcoholic drinking. It means, it's to keep it more simple. A recovered alcoholic is someone who has lost the desire and the obsession to alcohol. And it's also an allergy to alcohol. or drugs. And when I say alcohol, you can just exchange it for whatever substance you may use, right? And so, what is the allergy of alcohol? Why am I allergic to alcohol? So there's a reason, there's, reasons why someone may become an alcoholic, or maybe some people are born that way. And so it's pretty typical that when someone kind of develops alcoholism, it's predisposed along their, genealogy. Someone like, parents or grandparents or, great-great-grandparents and so on and so forth. But someone was kind of predisposed or had the alcoholic or the the addictive gene. And, some people, drink to the point where they become alcoholic, like me. Some people had started drinking as a result of trauma or loneliness. There's a variety of different reasons. Some people come from really good backgrounds and end up alcoholic or addicted to something, right? And it's not just, drugs or alcohol. You can become addicted to sex, to food, porn. There's, so many different things. Gambling is a big one. And so you got to be very careful, especially in the modern age, that you don't lose yourself. And if you lose yourself, that, you know that there is a way back, or a way through, rather. Is sobriety for you? If you want to get sober, then sobriety is for you. If you want it, it's for you. If you can't stop, even when you want to stop, there are programs of recovery that you can reach out to. In BC, there's a helpline. I don't have it on hand right now, but just look up, BC Addiction Help. There's also AA or Narcotics Anonymous. There's a whole variety of different, recovery or sobriety programs that will help you. But you gotta want it, and you gotta ask for help. And I just want to, say, I'm not promoting any programs of recovery. I'm just, giving you the information, that's readily available. If you are struggling to stop on your own, there is, help out there that you can find. Is sobriety for me, though? For me, it really is the key that unlocked the door to myself. As I was actively drinking and using drugs, I knew of me, but I didn't know me, if that makes sense. And I have over 15 months of sobriety, and I'm still getting to know myself. I'm still figuring out who this Kyle Antoine is. I know kind of, I know what I like. That's pretty easy. I like doing the podcast. I like going for walks. I like watching movies. I like meeting new people and hanging out with friends and, uploading to social media and listening to music. But those are just things that I like. Who is Kyle Antoine? I know kind of myself spiritually as well, but I'm really kind of, just learning who I am as a human being, as a person. So some people say the opposite of addiction is connection. And in my experience, that has been totally true. Having connection with people who are struggling the same way you are, who have a common goal of, whatever it is, really. But, having people that you can relate to and who you understand and who, understands you has been, monumental in my own recovery. Sharing the burden of life makes life a lot easier to carry. And in my experience of recovery, life isn't something that I alone need to carry. I have a higher power. I call it God. I call it the universe. I call it my spirit guides. I call it my higher self. Some people call it the spirit of the universe. Some people, and for me too, nature. And regardless, I don't have to carry it at all. And it's not my job to. And it's not my job to, I can only control myself. I can only control not taking the first drink or the first drug. And that's really about it. I can control what I got going on here with me, but what other people do outside of me is, out of my control. And I say that because, if you find yourself, overwhelmed and stuff, come back to this present moment with me. And let's just be here. Even, when I was actively drinking and using, I was surrounded by people, but I was truly alone in those, times. And in those moments, I didn't, care to connect necessarily, and I didn't care that, I was truly alone. I just cared that I was drunk or high. And, it kind of comes to a point where you're just alone and you don't want to be sober. And that kind of, at least in my experience, kind of spiraled into, using other drugs or alcohol or, as a way to cope with life. And see, I didn't have a problem with alcohol or drugs. I had a problem with life. I couldn't accept life on life's terms. I couldn't accept other people as they were. And most importantly, I couldn't accept myself for who I am. And as a result of that non-acceptance, I could never find peace. And, what did I tend to do when I, was stressed out or angry or happy even? I didn't even really need a reason at, points in time. I just, wanting to do it was enough of a reason to do it. And I really only alcoholically drank in 2024. That's when my alcoholism really developed and, came full force. Before that, I could take a drink and leave it. I probably was a heavy drinker, some may consider, but I definitely wasn't, incapable of stopping. And it's kind of a scary point when you're drinking and you want to stop, but you can't. You kind of drank yourself into this hole, and it's a very deep and dark hole. And oftentimes, being in that hole for so long, you don't have many people to kind of around you that to help you out. And that's where programs of recovery come in, where people who are also in the hole we all help each other out. It's kind of how it works. It is how it works. And I'm teetering on the line of, promoting and not promoting. But I am promoting sobriety for people who want it. And my message is really just this. If you want it, you got it. And if you can't do it on your own, we can do it together. And there's help out there. You gotta want it and ask for it. There's people, there's some people who haven't left their house in years, struggling and alone. Like, think about that. Someone who can't stop using drugs or drinking. People in homes, in houses, in apartments who can't stop. And they're hopeless, and they're in despair, and oftentimes, suicidal. Because that's what, alcoholism or addiction really is. It's slowly committing suicide. Now, I want to also preface by saying, again, not everyone is alcoholic. Not everyone is an addict. Some people can take, one or two or have a night out, and the next day they don't need it. They don't have the compulsion or the obsession or the desire to continue. They can pick it up when they want, and they can put it down as they want. Now, sorry for the coughing, but I think I'm just going to keep it really simple. Is sobriety for me, Kyle Antoine? For me, yes, it is. The alternative is, living a life that I don't want to live again. Sobriety and my recovery has given me more than drinking or drugging ever did, and more. And the most valuable things that I gained was a true sense of humility, a true sense of respect for life, and people who actually, care how I'm doing, if I'm staying sober, and, people who get me, who understand. And, a part of that is, a deeper connection to my God. And it's not, to me, it's not necessarily a religious one either. It's just God. To me, God is God. I don't necessarily need a religion attached to it, but it gave me connection, to myself, to others, to life as a whole, and to God, to a higher power, something bigger than myself. And, I'm so damn grateful. I'm grateful to be sober. I love being sober. I've been very fortunate, and I've been very blessed in this lifetime, thus far. And I'm just kind of in awe. I get so caught up in not being where in my mind, not being where I think I should be. And, oh my God, sorry for the coughing in your ear. But that I, kind of forget, how beautiful my life is right now in this moment, and how beautiful life is in general. I don't fear death, and I never really did, which also kind of maybe contributed to me being very reckless in my behavior and in my perspectives on, other people and stuff, and in my actions. But I don't fear death, but I've gained a respect for life, and, gained respect for how fragile it really is. Because, when you're young and you're growing up, you feel, maybe not, some may feel invincible, but you just feel like, it's not going to happen to me, or, I'm not going to die for a very long time. And so youth gives you the perspective that you have time, that, maybe, death is typically not on the minds of, teenagers, right? But, how fragile life really is. Like, go talk to someone with cancer and they'll tell you how fragile and how beautiful life is. Talk to someone who has been through it. I've gained a respect for life that I didn't have before. And, I gotta, practice every day, every moment, willingness, open-mindedness, and, love, respect, gratitude, your patience. These are all good human attributes that, should and oughta and must kind of be developed to, be a well-rounded individual, in my opinion. And, through my program of recovery, it has, allowed me, to strengthen my relationship with self and my relationships with others. It has allowed me to be someone who's dependable, responsible, someone who, can make, complicated decisions and, for the most part, make, good decisions. It has allowed me to choose. My recovery has, gifted me the choice, the ability to choose. Because when I was insanely drinking, I didn't have the choice. I didn't it wasn't a choice. I got to a point where I wanted to stop drinking and I couldn't. I lost the ability to choose. And so I needed a community and I needed a higher power, something bigger than myself, to get me sober and to keep me sober and to, eventually recover. And, I remember in the early days of my recovery, I would hear, I'm a recovered alcoholic or I'm a recovered addict. And I'm like, what does this recovered mean? What does it mean? I want that. I didn't even know what it was, but I was like, I want that. Because, it's exhausting. Constantly thinking of the next drink. How am I going to pay for it? Who's coming? Who are we drinking with? Where are we going to drink? It was just drink. What are you going to do today? Drink. And, obsessing over it. If it was around me, oh, could I have some? Or, let's go get some. Let's go buy some. And then once you develop withdrawal symptoms, like the shakes and, anxiety and heart palpitations, and, that's exhausting too, because now you have to go drink. So you're not losing your fucking shit internally, right? You're not I was literally would shake and it's like, holy fuck. And so there are medications and stuff. And so if you are a severe drinker and even if you're not alcoholic, but you're, choosing to stop and you can't because of the withdrawal symptoms, go to the hospital. So and be sober, because most of the time they won't give you medications until you come in sober. And sometimes they won't keep you overnight so that you can do it in the morning when you're sober. But if you're actually dying, call 911, but it's important to, know, if you were trying to get sober and you have, the shakes or you can die from those things, right? And so there's medication that you can take to, ease the symptoms while you're, withdrawing. Sorry, I'm just trying not to cough. So I'm just going to kind of keep it at that. Oh, it's sobriety for you. If you want to get sober, then yes, it is. If you're struggling to stay sober, you are not alone. There is help out there. You just got to be willing, wanting, not even necessarily, but you got to be willing, and you got to ask for help. Because people don't know if you need help or not. Only you, if you know you need help, go find it. It'll be the best decision you've ever made. And finally, I want to end this episode with some gratitude. If you have, listen to any podcast episode, thank you for listening to season 1. We got 2 more episodes coming, preluding the final episode on the 15th. So tomorrow's episode is Deja Vu, Am I Dreaming? A spiritual look into why we dream. And that episode is kind of just detailing, dreams that I've had, and then, experiencing, people or situations or places or things that, reflect the dream exactly, right? So deja vu. So why do we dream? And then I'll, after the stories, I'll or during, however I do it, then I'll, my spiritual take on it, right? And then on the 12th, there's the Tall Tales, a collection of stories most deem unexplainable. And that's really diving into stories and experiences that I've lived through that are paranormal, unexplainable through the lens of purely human logic. And that should, these are going to be some fun episodes. And so I figured I'd squeeze, these were kind of planned, and I came up with these episodes today. And so, and I've talked a bit about, I have a couple things on sobriety as well, but, I just wanted some more content for season 1. And so then season 2 starts on April 30th. The debut episode for season 2 starts at the end of the month, and we will be operating, releasing, on a bi-weekly basis. So we're going to get back on schedule bi-weekly every Sunday, every 2 weeks on Sunday at 10 p.m. A new episode of the Late Night Cool Down will be uploaded. So I'm very excited for this, and I will be making merch, and it will probably drop in the summertime, probably the end of July, beginning of August, the middle of the summer. So thank you for listening to the Late Night Cool Down. As tradition is 5 minutes till 10, and I'll see you tomorrow, or you'll hear me tomorrow. Anyways, thanks for listening, and goodbye.